I used to perform 2 to 3 times a month and would hold classes in this very room. But from February this year, all of my classes and shows have been cancelled, and my classes were the only source of income for me. We've had zero income for the past 6 months.
Jun is one of hundreds, if not thousands, of freelance artists in Korea struggling in the COVID-19 pandemic. Being freelancers, they knew that their working environment was going to be unpredictable. But what they did not expect was the complete vacuum in projects brought on by a pandemic.
All of the plays that I have been preparing for in 2020 were cancelled. We never really had permanent employment anyway. We were always jumping from one project to another. In the downtime, we'd get some part-time jobs, but even those are not available anymore because of the pandemic. I think what makes it worse is that we don't know when all of this will pass.
With the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic in Korea earlier in the year, about 90% of plays, dance performances, and concerts have been postponed indefinitely or cancelled altogether. According to Korea Performing Arts Box Office Information System, the number of shows dropped from 1,598 in December last year to 185 in April this year. To resuscitate the industry, the Korean government stepped in with the COVID-19 recovery plan. The Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism announced in February a set of emergency funds for artists, including compensation of 3 million won for any artist who experienced loss in income due to the coronavirus outbreak. The funding was open for some 7,500 artists. It was then expanded to cover 7,000 more artists in July when a record-breaking 35 trillion won supplementary budget was passed by the National Assembly, part of which would make up the COVID-19 recovery package. As the number of new cases dropped to around 10 or less in May, public performance halls, which have been shut for months, began to reopen, but with social distancing measures in place. To keep to the government's guidelines on social distancing, the theaters and halls had to space out the seats so that audiences were seated at least 1 meter apart from each other. It was a rule that not everyone could keep up with.
Private organizations like us, the government could not enforce these policies because we were funding our projects out of our own pockets. Because the performance hall for our regular ballet program was already quite small, we couldn't leave too many seats vacant. But we were very meticulous in disinfecting the hall before and after each performance.
But with no end on the COVID-19 situation in sight, Kim said the company is looking into other means to produce the programs, including online platforms.
I think this year we may just have to stick things out to the best of our abilities. But starting next year, we're hoping to produce content that audiences can enjoy without being there in person through online platforms.
Streaming the shows online is something that a lot of performing arts groups are considering these days. We spoke with Yoon Bomi of a classical music production company who has streamed more than 40 concerts online since the onset of the pandemic in Korea.
We began holding the online concerts since February, when the COVID-19 situation led to the cancellation of all our shows and we needed a new business plan. But there were some issues like having a very reduced sound capacity or people to focus during the concert because it was an on-screen performance. I don't think that the online concerts can completely replace the concerts attended in person.
The latest struggles of freelance artists have, however, led to some breakthroughs in terms of legislation action. An amendment to the Labor Standards Act was passed in May, which finally included freelancers and artists as workers who can apply for employment insurance scheme in Korea. According to the Korean government's statistics, only 26.1% of artists in the performing arts field are insured by the employment insurance in Korea. But at the end of the day, what freelance artists are looking for is a space to perform.
What we need the most is a space to perform. When the government says you can only host shows when the seats are separated, that's not going to work out because then the production companies can't make enough money. These regulations are not helping the artists. They have to make it possible for us to perform.
I have not been able to perform at all. If only I could find ways to keep performing. It would make the situation so much more bearable.
There is no end in sight yet for the COVID-19 pandemic. But the freelance artists that we've met said it should not stop them from finding new ways to create and perform, so that they will be ready when the curtains go up again and they're back in the spotlight.